Well, exclusive new border numbers obtained by Fox are sparking renewed national security fears. CBP tells us migrants who entered illegally and did not turn themselves in are at an all-time high under President Biden, with more than 1.6 million gotaways in the last 3 fiscal years alone. Now, that's more than the Trump and Obama years combined. In addition, there have been more than 365 people on the terror watch list caught trying to sneak in. Let's bring in Nebraska Senator Pete Ricketts. He serves on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And Senator, the last part of that intro said that the people who are on the watch list, they were caught trying to sneak in. So are we catching most of these would-be criminals, or are most of them part of the got-away list as well?
Well, that's the problem with this Biden open border policy, is that we just don't know. During the Trump administration, there were 14 people on the FBI's terrorist watch list that tried to cross the border illegally and were caught. And Trump brought illegal border crossings to a 45-year low. This administration, as you mentioned, has had hundreds, and that doesn't count the people that are getting across in that 1.4 million you mentioned. And actually, it is just crazy that if you look at all the numbers across the Biden administration, how much more it is than the last 10 years combined in those two administrations. And because they're gotaways, we don't know how many terrorists got in there.
Wow. How do you happen to know how are they physically evading border agents, and who's helping them?
Well, this is all being done by the cartels, right? The cartels are being paid to move people or drugs or whatever. And I've been on the border 4 times and talked to Customs and Border Protection folks. And what the cartels will do is they'll take a bunch of folks who are coming here illegally, put them through in one sector, and then take their high-value targets, so maybe people who are terrorists, or maybe it's the drugs, and push them through in a different sector where they know we're thin because we have to move the resources around. I mean, the cartels are running this like a highly efficient business, and frankly, this is why the Biden border policies are endangering our country.
So if you were to temporarily close the U.S. southern border, would the cartel still find a way to smuggle illegal immigrants into our country?
Well, let's look at what the Trump administration did. They had the Remain in Mexico policy, and they brought illegal crossings down to a 45-year low. In 2019, when I was governor, there was about 46 pills laced with fentanyl that we took off our highways. By the first 6 months of 2021, that number jumped to 151,000. So while you may not be able to cut it down to 0, we can see that the Trump policies were able to bring the number of people and illegal drugs coming across the border down to very low numbers. And this open border policy has just thrown it all wide open. And that's why we're being flooded, for example, with these illegal drugs.
So then, considering this will remain a crisis for the next 8 months, if Trump were to become president again, what would he do on day 1 to secure the border and cut off the flow of illegal immigrants?
Yeah, well, I haven't talked to the Trump administration, but as I talk to Customs and Border Protection people, they say the single biggest thing we could do to turn this around is re-implement Remain in Mexico. This is the policy where if you're coming to seek asylum in our country, you have to wait for years sometimes in Mexico until you get your asylum hearing. The way it's working right now is that Biden's letting everybody into the country, and they're in our country for years waiting for the hearing. And by the way, how many of those people you think actually come back years later to their hearing? Not many.
So is Mexico now totally against the Remain in Mexico policy?
Well, when the Trump administration proposed it to Mexico in the first place, they were against it, but the Trump administration convinced them to be able to implement that policy. The Biden administration could do the same thing, and I'm confident the Trump administration will do it if they're reelected.
So meanwhile, I guess we wait? I mean, is that what we do?
Sadly, that's what we're looking at, is this open border policy that is created by Joe Biden is letting in millions of people. We didn't even talk about the abuse of parole, and it is creating a national security, human trafficking, sex trafficking, child trafficking crisis at our southern border. It's a catastrophe, and all of this is directly the responsibility of Joe Biden.
And what about that bipartisan Senate border bill that was in place and just got turned down because basically President Trump, former president, told the Republicans don't pass it. He wants to run on the border issue.
Well, I got to tell you, in the Senate, nobody was voting against that bill because Trump told them to. It was because it was a bad bill. Look, it set the
well, in the House,
emergency
let's
level
say,
at 5,000.
excuse me. Pardon me then, what if it was on the House side? What about that? Somebody was told in Congress to not vote on it because President Trump, former president, didn't want it to pass under Biden.
At the end of the day, it was a bad bill. It set the emergency level at 5,000. 5,000 is a catastrophe. 1,000 is an emergency level. Even Obama level people admitted that. That's just one of the bad things. It didn't adjust the abuse of parole. It didn't close the loopholes in our asylum system. It was a terrible bill, and that's why it failed in the Senate. In the House, I can't speak to that. I'm not in the House, but I can tell you it was a bad bill.
Okay, so with more than 1.6 million gotaways in the last 3 fiscal years alone, you would think that a bad bill is better than no bill.
Yeah, I would disagree with you on that one. It didn't do anything to address the real problems here. It didn't do anything to implement Remain in Mexico. It didn't do anything to end Biden's abuse of parole. You know, he's paroled 1.2 million people into our country last year. That number on average during Trump and Obama was 5,600 people a year. That's just one example of how Biden is continuing to abuse our laws, to subvert our laws, to allow literally millions of people into our country. The bill that was proposed would not do anything to address that.
Senator, with an 8,000% increase of Chinese nationals illegally crossing the southern border in the last, 2.5 years, what's the national security implication?
Well, this is huge. This is why I said it was a national security crisis that Biden's creating our border. We'd be naive to think that the Chinese Communist Party is not putting spies and saboteurs in that huge group of people that are coming across. Just a few weeks ago in the San Diego sector, in 3 days, they had more Chinese nationals cross than the entire 2021. So our adversaries, like the People's Republic of China, know we have an open border. And it's not just them, it's also Syrians, it's Iranians. They're coming across our border, and they're going.
I mean, it's alarming.
It's alarming. It's creating
crisis.
We're
showing pictures. It's a crisis for sure. And I'm running up against the clock, but I want to ask you, because I know you said that bill that was on the table, the Senate border bill, was not sufficient. So can Congress do anything, or we just wait for Biden's failed border policies to just prevail for the next 8 months until
at the end of the
there's
day,
another
we know
president,
that,
perhaps?
Well, at the end of the day, what we know is that Biden could address this if he wants to. He chooses not to. He has the same tools Trump did when Trump brought it to 45-year low. A real bill that would force Biden to close the border is something that could pass, but the Democrats have not allowed that. They blocked it in the Senate. Because we voted on H.R. 1, for example. Frankly, at the end of the day, the thing we need to do is throw this president out of office.
All right, Republican Senator from Nebraska, Pete Ricketts, thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.